Have you ever seen someone borrow money and still be rich? In fact, some of them borrow millions of dollars, but they still live comfortably, keep spending, keep investing, and their assets continue to grow over time. Meanwhile, for many of us, even taking out a small loan to buy a car, buy a house, or simply get through life can already create monthly pressure because of interest and installment payments. It is all borrowing money, so why is there such a huge difference? And more importantly, if we are trapped in a cycle of debt, what should we do to gradually get out of it? To answer that question, let us begin with the story of Bobo. Difference 1. What do they borrow money to buy? Look at Bobo's borrowing journey to clearly see how a liability can slowly wear a person down. When Bobo received $20,000 from the bank, he immediately rushed to the dealership to buy an ordinary car for daily transportation and to protect himself from rain and sun. At that moment, Bobo felt extremely proud because he thought he now owned a valuable asset. But the harsh truth was that the car was actually a classic liability. The very moment Bobo drove it out of the dealership and onto the road, its value immediately dropped sharply. 1 year later, the car had become older and had fallen in value to only $16,000. Then 2 years later, it was worth only $12,000. Meanwhile, the bank debt had not really gone down. And on top of that, because of the pressure from consumer loan interest, after 2 years of working hard to make installment payments, Bobo was shocked to realize that his remaining principal and interest balance was still extremely high. The car kept losing value, not to mention he also had to spend extra money on gas, maintenance, and parking every month, making the financial burden on his shoulders heavier and heavier. This mistake kept repeating itself when Bobo swiped his credit card and paid in installments to upgrade to a brand new computer for entertainment, or bought the latest phone simply because he wanted to keep up with his friends. As a result, the money Bobo borrowed was used to buy things that lost value or were quickly consumed. The items he bought soon became outdated, their value disappeared, but the debt and interest stayed right there, tightening around his daily income. Meanwhile, his friend Lulu never borrows money to buy a car or the latest phone through consumer installment payments. Instead, he only borrows against assets that keep increasing in value, so the original assets never have to be sold. For example, Lulu owns a townhouse in the city center worth $800,000. Instead of selling that house to get cash for pleasure spending, an action that would make him lose his golden goose, Lulu takes the property documents to the bank and borrows $200,000. At that point, a kind of financial magic appears. The townhouse still fully belongs to Lulu. It still steadily brings him $3,000 per month from rental income, and the land value still grows automatically by 8% to 10% every year, along with the real estate wave. So Lulu holds $200,000 in borrowed money to use for his lifestyle, to buy a luxury car or a new phone entirely in cash, while his original asset remains in place and continues to grow bigger. A similar situation happens when Lulu holds a stock portfolio worth $2 million. He does not sell the stocks. Instead, he chooses to use them as collateral to borrow $400,000 from the bank. While Lulu uses this borrowed money for spending, his stock portfolio at the bank continues to pay dividends and automatically grows to $3 million after just a few years, thanks to the growth of the economy. The comparison between these two lives highlights the true nature of this financial game. Bobo borrows money through an unsecured personal loan to exchange it for liabilities such as a car, a computer, and a phone. His money evaporates, his purchases lose value, but the debt and high interest remain, forcing him to sell his future time to pay for things that already lost their value in the past. In contrast, Lulu borrows money by using assets as collateral to get cash. This allows the money to be spent, while the original assets continue to generate returns, grow on their own, and even support their own debt. This helps him have money to spend while still becoming wealthier over time. This model creates a wealth gap that is almost impossible to close. When Bobo swipes his card to buy things in installments, he is personally signing a labor sentence that serves the bank's profits. But when Lulu signs a loan agreement, he is using leverage to activate his assets and make them work even harder. Difference 2. What source do they use to pay off the debt? After borrowing $20,000 from the bank to buy the car, Bobo has to face the stressful journey of paying back the debt with his after-tax salary. Meanwhile, Lulu has a completely different repayment method, using cash flow from assets and not spending a single dollar of taxed salary. Look at Bobo's monthly cash flow to see this burden clearly. Bobo's gross salary is $1,800 per month, but the system automatically deducts 10% for income tax and insurance first, leaving him with only $1,620 in take-home pay. From this amount, Bobo has to pay for basic survival needs, including $500 for rent, $400 for food, $200 for car expenses, and $150 for miscellaneous costs. After subtracting all living expenses, he has exactly $370 left. At this point, the required payment to the bank, including both principal and interest, costs $425 per month because of the pressure from high consumer loan interest. In the end, Bobo not only has nothing left over, but he also has to scramble to find about $55 more every month just to have enough money to pay the bank. And Bobo is paying taxes to the government while also paying debt to the bank from that already reduced income. If Bobo loses his job, his cash flow breaks immediately, and the bank can repossess the car right away because his life depends completely on his wage-paying job. While Bobo is trapped in the maze of salary income, Lulu manages his debt through the opposite mechanism. He only pays interest using cash flow and never pays down the principal. From the $400,000 loan backed by his $2 million stock portfolio, with a preferred interest rate of 3% per year, Lulu only has to pay $1,000 in interest each month. This amount is automatically covered by stock dividends or by the $3,000 per month in rental income from the townhouse he owns. The asset generates money to support its own debt. So what about the $400,000 principal? With certain loans designed for people who own large assets, Lulu may be able to pay only interest for a period of time. When the loan reaches maturity, if the asset is still valuable enough and the bank agrees, Lulu can refinance, meaning he borrows a new loan to pay off the old one. The special point is that borrowed money is usually not considered taxable income because it is money that must be repaid. When Bobo receives a salary, he is taxed before he can spend it. But when Lulu receives $400,000 in borrowed money, it is usually not taxed like salary at the moment he receives it. But this does not mean Lulu has no risk. If stocks drop sharply, the house loses value, tenants leave, or interest rates rise too high, Lulu can still face pressure. The difference is that Lulu has assets, cash flow, and more options to handle the situation. The difference lies in the source used to repay the debt. Bobo works, pays taxes, covers living expenses, and then uses what is left to pay both principal and interest. Lulu has assets first, borrows against those assets, and then uses asset cash flow to pay the interest. Bobo uses his labor to feed the debt. Lulu uses his assets to feed the debt. That is why the issue is not only how much someone borrows. The real issue is what source of money is used to repay that debt. If it is paid with a small amount of after-tax salary, even a small debt can become a heavy burden. But if it is backed by cash-flowing assets, even a large debt can become a financial tool. Difference 3. How does the bank treat them? Now, after Bobo is shocked to discover the cash flow mechanism and the unfairness of the tax system, he starts asking why the same banking system has two completely different sets of rules for different people. That is the third difference, how the bank treats them. This difference does not come from whether the bank employees like or dislike anyone. It comes from the fact that banks operate based on risk measurement and the borrower's ability to repay. When Bobo walks into the bank to maintain his $20,000 car loan, he always finds himself in a weak position because, in the eyes of the financial system, he is considered a very high-risk borrower. The reason is very simple. Bobo has no valuable, highly liquid collateral besides a car that is losing value every day and a monthly wage-paying job. And that job could disappear at any time if the company cuts staff or the economy falls into a recession. Because the risk of losing money is high, the bank has to protect itself by applying an extremely strict policy to Bobo. His car loan carries a high interest rate, around 10% to 12% per year, to make up for a risk level that is 3 to 4 times higher than the rate wealthy borrowers can get. Bobo's loan application also takes weeks to be reviewed. The terms are very tight, and if he is late on a payment by even 1 day, the system will automatically charge heavy penalties and keep sending warning messages. If Bobo runs into trouble and is late into the second month, he will be placed on the bad debt list. Every future borrowing door will slam shut, and the bank will quickly send someone to repossess the car and liquidate it to recover the debt without mercy. To the bank, Bobo is like someone walking on a tightrope, and they must keep a pair of scissors ready to cut the rope immediately if he shows any sign of slipping. In complete contrast, when Lulu shows up, the bank looks at him like a VIP partner who must be courted at all costs because of the huge amount of assets he owns. When Lulu owns $2 million in assets but only borrows $400,000, his loan-to-value ratio is only 20%. This means that even if the stock market crashes, or worse, if Lulu's stocks lose half their value, the bank is still completely safe because it can still liquidate the remaining assets to fully recover the $400,000 it lent him without worrying about taking a loss. Because Lulu's risk level is almost zero, the bank immediately activates the privilege rulebook for wealthy clients, offering an extremely low preferred interest rate of only 3% per year to compete with other banks and keep him as a customer. The terms for Lulu are extremely loose and flexible. He only needs to pay monthly interest, and he can easily get extensions or refinance year after year without complicated procedures. Even if Lulu is late on a payment, there are no debt collection calls or asset seizure orders. Instead, the bank manager will personally call to check on him and invite him to a private meeting to suggest ways to restructure his cash flow or even offer to lend him more money to get through the difficult period. This contrast helps Bobo understand that the bank does not care who you are, it only cares how easy it is to get its money back from you. With Bobo, collecting the money is difficult and depends completely on his health and his job, so the bank applies high interest rates and strict terms. With Lulu, collecting the money is extremely easy because the assets are always within the bank's control, so it applies low interest rates and relaxed terms. This logic creates a major paradox in society. The poorer people are, and the more they lack money, the more expensive it is for them to borrow, and the more strictly they are controlled. Meanwhile, the richer people are, and the more assets they have, the cheaper they can borrow, and the more freedom they receive. The financial system was not created to make everyone equal, because it is designed as a professional risk management business machine. And it will always lean toward people who already own assets, like Lulu, in order to maximize the safety of capital. Difference 4. How does the debt end? After fully understanding that banks divide their rules of treatment based on asset risk, Bobo reaches the final chapter of debt. Here, Bobo realizes that debt can shape a person's life when they are young, and it can also determine how they face death and transfer wealth to the next generation. Look at how Bobo's debt ends to see the exhaustion of a working person's life. After 5 years of working non-stop, sacrificing sleep and food, and squeezing every part of his living expenses, Bobo finally completes his obligation to the bank and pays off the loan for his ordinary car. But when he looks back at the numbers, Bobo realizes a bitter truth. From the original $20,000 loan, the total amount he actually paid the bank, including both principal and interest, reached nearly $26,000. Even more bitterly, right at the moment Bobo officially owns the car completely, this liability has become old and outdated, and its market value is now only $8,000. Bobo traded a huge amount of time and labor from his past just to get something that is losing value in the present. Life keeps moving this way, and Bobo continues stepping into new debt cycles, borrowing money to repair the house, borrowing money to pay for his child's college education, and borrowing money for medical treatment. The ending of Bobo's debt is a long chain of days filled with sweat and tears. And when he finally passes away, there is not much wealth left, but his life has already been drained. Meanwhile, Lulu ends his debt with a completely different scenario. Instead of selling assets to get spending money, Lulu keeps the assets and lets them continue rising in value or generating cash flow. When he needs money, Lulu uses those same assets as collateral to borrow from the bank. Because of that, Lulu still has money to live comfortably, while his original assets remain in his hands. By the end of his life, Lulu's debt can even be handled through inherited assets and a United States tax mechanism called a step-up in basis. At 80 years old, Lulu passes away, leaving behind $8 million in assets and $2 million in accumulated bank debt from previous collateralized loans. The difficult question here is, who will pay this $2 million debt to the bank? The answer lies in how the tax system works when Lulu transfers assets to his child. Remember that most of Lulu's assets are stocks he bought many years ago with an original cost basis of only $40,000. If Lulu sold those stocks while he was still alive to get cash, he would have to pay a huge income tax bill on nearly $1.96 million in gains. But because Lulu chooses not to sell and holds those assets until death before passing them on to his child, the tax system automatically triggers the reset mechanism. The law treats the child as owning those stocks with a completely new cost basis of $2 million at the moment of inheritance. The child only needs to immediately sell those stocks on the market to receive $2 million in cash. And because the sale price is exactly equal to the newly reset cost basis, the taxable gain is $0, meaning there is no tax owed to the government. The child uses that exact $2 million in tax-free cash to fully repay the bank debt, and naturally keeps the remaining $6 million in assets completely cleanly, then continues repeating the same borrow against assets formula from their father for the next generation. This final comparison exposes the ultimate logic of the financial system. Bobo repays debt with an entire life of hard labor, while Lulu lets death and tax law repay debt for him. Bobo spends his whole life paying debt for things that lost their value long ago, causing his children, when they grow up, to start again from the starting line with empty hands and continue falling into the same debt trap. In contrast, Lulu turns debt into a perfect shield for protecting assets, helping the family's cash flow avoid being reduced by income taxes, and from there, preserving and multiplying wealth across hundreds of years. This final difference is no longer just about what someone buys or what source they use to repay debt. It proves that the rich have mastered the rules of the game completely, turning debt from a chain of slavery into a tool for passing down ultimate financial power. Lessons learned. After breaking down all 4 core differences in the financial game, from what people borrow money to buy, the source of repayment, how the bank treats them, and how the debt eventually ends, Bobo no longer sees the world through the eyes of a passive wage earner. He has now fully understood the true nature of the game. The purpose of understanding these mechanisms is so that we can draw practical lessons, help each person remove their own chains, and change their own position. Even though Bobo and each of us cannot instantly become wealthy overnight, we can absolutely apply 3 daily strategic steps so that money no longer controls our lives. The first and most important step is to clearly distinguish between assets and liabilities before making any spending decision. Before signing a loan agreement or swiping a credit card to buy something, we need to pause for a moment and ask ourselves whether this thing will generate money or continue pulling money out of our pockets every month. Immediately stopping debt used to satisfy temporary pride is the only way to cut off the source of energy that the financial system has been draining from us. Next, the second step is to focus on accumulating assets starting from the smallest numbers, without waiting until we have a huge amount of money. Setting aside a small portion of monthly income to store gold, put money into long-term savings, or invest in portfolios with growth potential is the way to own things that can grow on their own over time. Finally, the third step is to completely change the way we think about debt by understanding that debt is only toxic when it is used to buy liabilities. But once we own assets, debt can become a powerful lever that helps increase our wealth faster without being affected by income tax. So, we can see that money is a complete system of control, built from debt, law, and deep psychological manipulation. Understanding the true nature of this system helps each person become more alert and wiser in every financial decision in life. When we understand the rules of the game, learn how to control our emotions, and know how to protect the results of our labor from the pressure of inflation, that is when we begin to reclaim real freedom. Money will always be a cruel master if you do not know how to turn it into a tool that serves your own goals and your own life. If you still have any concerns or questions related to financial issues in everyday life, leave your thoughts in the comment section below so we can decode them together in the next videos.